I was in the middle of folding laundry when my daughter called. Not texted. Called, which should have told me something right there. "Mom," she said, and her voice had that particular brightness to it, the kind that means she's already decided something and is only now getting around to telling me. "So, Christmas this year. We're thinking your place. Neil and I talked about it, and honestly, it just makes the most sense. You have the big dining room, the kids love your house, and you're so much better at all of this than we are." I set down the towel I was folding. "How many people?" I asked. A pause. "Well, that's the thing. We kind of already mentioned it to a few people, so it's grown a little. Maybe 35? 40? Everyone's so excited, Mom. 40 people. In my house, that she had already invited. Without asking me," I said. "I'll think about it," and I got off the phone. Then I sat down on the edge of my bed and looked out the window at the birch trees in the backyard, the ones my husband Gerald planted the year our youngest was born. The snow was just starting to settle on the branches. It was the second week of November. Christmas was 6 weeks away. I had been hosting Christmas for 23 years. Every single one. When the children were small, and it was only the 8 of us, I did it. When my sister-in-law Bev moved her whole family in from Red Deer, and we suddenly had 14 mouths to feed, I did it. When my daughter got married, and her husband's family, a loud, cheerful, well-meaning group from Cape Breton, joined us, and the table stretched all the way from the dining room into the front hallway, I did it. I did it the year I had bronchitis so bad I could barely stand up. I did it the year my mother passed in October and I was still raw with grief. I did it without being asked because I thought that was what you did for the people you loved. I don't know exactly when I became a given. I think it happened gradually, the way things do. You say yes enough times and eventually no one thinks to ask anymore. You're just the yes. You're just the place where Christmas happens. Gerald died 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 8 weeks from diagnosis to gone, which is the cruelest speed I know. After he died, I sold the big house in Canada. Too many rooms, too many echoes into a smaller place in Stittsville, just off Abbott Street. A proper house, not a condo, because I wanted the yard. But it's mine. My name on the deed, my name on everything. I bought it with my own savings and a portion of Gerald's life insurance, and I worked for 31 years as a registered nurse at the Queensway Carleton Hospital, and I earned every square foot of it. My daughter lives 20 minutes away with her husband Neil and their 2 children, who I love more than I can properly say. My son lives in Victoria, which might as well be the moon. He calls when he remembers. Now, about my daughter. I love her. I want to say that clearly because everything else I'm about to tell you could make it sound like I don't. And that would be wrong. She is funny and generous and a devoted mother, but she has, in the past several years, developed a habit of organizing things without consulting the people involved in those things. A trip to Quebec City that everyone agreed to before I had heard a word about it. A birthday party for my grandson that was scheduled on the same weekend as my closest friend Vera's retirement party, which my daughter knew about and which she worked around anyway. Small things, on their own. But they accumulate. 40 people at Christmas was not a small thing. I did not call her back that night. I thought about it carefully, the way Gerald always told me to. He used to say, "Eileen, you don't have to answer right away. You're allowed to think." He was the calm one. I was the one who wanted to say everything the moment I felt it, and over 40 years he softened that in me, mostly. But the impulse is still there. The next morning, I called my friend Vera. "She invited 40 people to your house without asking you," Vera said. 35 to 40. There's some flexibility, apparently. Vera made a sound I can only describe as a soft explosion. "Eileen!" "I know. What are you going to do?" "I'm not sure yet," I said. "But I know what I'm not going to do." I had, over the last few years, begun to understand something about myself that took me a long time to learn. I am not someone who is good at saying no in the moment. When I'm caught off guard, when someone is warm and enthusiastic and already committed, I fold. I have always folded. I tell myself it's because I don't want to disappoint people. And that's true, but it's also true that somewhere along the way, I started to believe that my comfort mattered less than everyone else's ease. that it was my job to make things smooth. Gerald's death changed something in me. When you spend 8 weeks watching someone you love disappear, and then you spend the following years living alone in a quiet house, you do a lot of thinking. I thought about all the times I'd said yes when I meant no. All the times I'd run myself ragged for people who thanked me briefly and forgot about it by New Year's. I thought about the Christmases I barely remember because I spent them in the kitchen, coming out to smile and then retreating again, while everyone else sat around the living room and had conversations I never got to be part of. I was 67 years old. I had maybe 20 good Christmases left in me, if I was lucky. I was not going to spend them feeding 40 people who were invited without my knowledge. I called my daughter back the following evening. "Mom!" She sounded relieved. Guilty, actually, underneath the brightness. I know her voice better than she knows I do. "I was going to call you. I know that probably seemed like a lot." "It did," I said. "I can't host Christmas for 40 people this year." Silence. "Mom, everyone's already kind of." "I understand," I said, "and I'm sorry that's awkward. But I can't do it. I'm not up for that kind of event this year." I paused. "I'm going to spend Christmas at the cabin." The cabin was Gerald's, a small place on a lake near Calabogie that his family had owned since the 1970s. When he died, it passed to me. I hadn't been back since the first summer after the funeral, too painful, but in October I'd driven out there for a weekend and something in me had eased, being in that place. The smell of wood smoke and lake, the quiet. "The cabin," my daughter repeated. "Alone?" "With Vera, maybe. Or alone." "I haven't decided." "Mom," her voice had shifted. The brightness was gone. That's really sad. Christmas alone at a cabin? People are going to worry about you." "They can call and check on me," I said pleasantly. "I'll have my phone." She didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "We already told the Hendersons. And Aunt Bev and Neil's parents are coming from Cape Breton." There it was, the real reason for the call. Not to ask me. To present me with a situation I couldn't logically back out of because too many people had already been set in motion. "Then you'll need to find another venue," I said. The word venue hung there between us. I had deliberately used it. Because that's what this was, an event she was organizing, and framing it that way removed the part where I was supposed to feel guilty for not being her free event space. She inhaled sharply. "Mom, this is the family Christmas." "It is," I agreed. "I hope it's a lovely one." We said goodbye. I hung up. Then I sat very still for a little while, because even when you say the right thing, it doesn't always feel clean. It feels like something tearing, just a little. By the next morning, my phone had started. First it was Neil. My son-in-law is not a bad man. He is what I would call a person who has been gently raised to believe that problems exist to be smoothed over, and that the person best positioned to smooth them is usually not him. He called to say that my daughter was very upset, and that they hadn't meant to put pressure on me, and that they just wanted everyone together, and was there any way I could reconsider? He was polite. He was not unkind. I thanked him for calling and told him my answer was the same. Then my sister-in-law Bev called from Red Deer. Bev and I have a complicated relationship. She is Gerald's younger sister, and she loved him ferociously, and I think some part of her has always held me slightly responsible for the fact that he moved to Ottawa instead of staying in Alberta. She has never said this, but I feel it. "Your daughter tells me you're backing out of Christmas," she said. "I didn't know I'd agreed to host Christmas," I said. Brief pause. "Well, she said it was at your place." "She said that without asking me, Eileen." Bev's voice carries a particular quality when she uses my name like that, like she's addressing someone who needs to be managed. "The kids are coming all this way. Neil's parents are flying in. It's a lot of people to disappoint." "I understand," I said, "but the decision was made without consulting me. I've been cooking Christmas dinner for 23 years. I'd like to spend this one differently, at a cabin, alone." She said it the same way my daughter had, as if doing something alone was evidence of dysfunction. "With my friend Vera, possibly. Yes, Gerald would have wanted. Bev," I said her name the same way she'd said mine, "please don't do that." A very long pause. "Well," she finally said, "I think this is going to hurt a lot of feelings." "I hope everyone has a wonderful Christmas." I said. I got off the phone and I made myself a cup of tea, and I stood at the kitchen window and watched two squirrels conduct some kind of territorial dispute in the birch tree. It occurred to me that I had just been told by three separate people that my feelings were not part of the equation, that the equation only had room for everyone else's feelings, and that my function was to absorb them. I had been absorbing things for a very long time. Then the message came from my daughter's best friend Stacy, who is not related to me in any way and who I have met perhaps a dozen times at family events. She texted to say she'd heard I wasn't hosting this year and she just wanted to check in because she was a little worried about me, which was so presumptuous and also so clearly orchestrated that I almost laughed. Almost. 2 days later came the part that I did not see coming. My daughter drove over. "Not to talk about Christmas," she said. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, with her hands wrapped around her coffee mug, and she said she was worried about me. More generally. Not just the cabin thing. She'd been noticing things, she said. I'd missed my grandson's hockey game last month. I'd mixed up the date of her friend's baby shower, the one I'd said I would help with. I'd sounded tired on the phone the last few times she'd called. "Mom," she said, and her voice was very careful. "I just want to make sure you're doing okay. Living alone, you know, since Dad." I looked at her. I know my daughter. I know the difference between when she's genuinely worried and when she's constructing something. "I'm fine," I said. "I missed the hockey game because I had a migraine, which I told you about. I mixed up the shower date because I had it written in the wrong week in my calendar, which I noticed and corrected. I'm tired on the phone sometimes because I work 2 shifts a week still at the walk-in clinic, and I'm 67 years old and I get tired. These are not symptoms of decline. They are symptoms of being a person." She flushed. "I'm not trying to." "I know what you're doing," I said quietly, "and I understand why. You're worried that if people start asking questions, they'll say, well, if she's not doing well, maybe she shouldn't be out at a cabin alone. Maybe she should be closer to family. Maybe the house is too much for her. She didn't say anything. I'm not going to be talked out of my own decisions by having my competence questioned," I said. "That's not going to work." She left shortly after. She wasn't unkind, but she was brittle. I watched her back out of the driveway, and I felt something that I can only describe as a kind of sadness that has nothing to do with regret. You can know that you're right and still grieve the version of things you wished you'd had. The call I did not expect came from my son in Victoria. He called on a Tuesday evening, which was unusual. We usually talked on Sundays. "Mom," he said, "what's going on with you?" His sister had called him. "Of course," I gave him the short version. "She invited 40 people without asking you?" "She did." Long pause. Yeah. Okay. That's not great, sighed. He only calls me sighed when he's talking to me straight. It's a habit from childhood. "Look, I talked to her and she seems pretty convinced you're not doing well. I told her you sounded fine to me. But she mentioned something about the house. She said you'd talked about it being too big, that you'd thought about downsizing." I had said no such thing. I had said, once, at dinner, that Vera was thinking about moving to a condo and that I understood the appeal of simplicity. That was all. "I have never said I wanted to leave this house," I said. "Yeah, I thought that sounded off." Another pause. "Mom, is there anything, financially, I mean, is everything okay? Do you need anything?" "I'm a retired nurse with a full pension and no mortgage," I said. "I don't need anything. Thank you for asking." That was when something clicked into place for me, because it was one thing for my daughter to be embarrassed about the Christmas situation. It was another thing to be talking to her brother about my finances, about the house, about whether I was, as she'd phrased it, doing well. I thought about what Vera had said when I described the whole situation to her the previous week. Vera is 71 and the sharpest person I know. She spent 30 years as a family court lawyer in Ottawa before she retired, and she has an eye for what's actually happening underneath what appears to be happening. "Eileen," she'd said, "what is the house worth?" I told her. "And your daughter knows this." "We've discussed it. Generally." "Not numbers. And the cabin?" "Waterfront property on a lake in the Ottawa Valley. Gerald bought it in 1987 for $60,000. It was now worth considerably more than that. Vera had looked at me over her wine glass, and she's the one who started talking about whether you're managing okay on your own. I hadn't put it together quite that directly until she said it. I did not say anything about this to my daughter. I did not say anything to anyone except Vera. Instead, I drove out to Calabogie one weekend in late November, partly to open the cabin up and check on it, and partly to think. I sat on the dock in my winter coat with a thermos of coffee, and I thought about Gerald, about how meticulous he was, about the afternoons he'd spent with our family lawyer, a meticulous man named Howard Finch who had an office on Sparks Street and who had managed our affairs since the early 90s. Gerald had updated his will twice in his last decade. He'd made sure everything was clear. I had not revisited those documents since Gerald died. I had not needed to. But sitting on that dock, I thought maybe I should. I made an appointment with Howard Finch's office the following week. Howard had retired, but his daughter-in-law Priya had taken over the practice, and she turned out to be exactly what I needed. Precise, direct, and completely without sentimentality. I spent 2 hours with Priya going over everything. My will, the house, the cabin, my RRSP, the beneficiaries on my accounts, all of it. 2 things became clear in that meeting. The first was that my estate, as it stood, was set up in a way that was straightforward, but perhaps not as protective as it could be, given what I was now thinking about. Priya walked me through some options, specifically around placing certain assets into a trust that would benefit my grandchildren directly, bypassing the generation in between, with conditions I could set myself. The second thing was that Priya had some very sensible advice about documentation. At your age, she said, and she said it matter-of-factly without condescension, if anyone ever questions your cognitive state, and I say if, not when, you want a record, I'd suggest a note from your GP, a cognitive assessment if you want something formal, just so it exists. I made an appointment with my GP the following week. Dr. Okafor has been my doctor for 11 years. She is thorough and unexcitable, and I trust her completely. I explained the situation. She did not seem particularly surprised. She said she could do a brief cognitive screening that day, and if I wanted something more comprehensive, she could refer me to a geriatric assessment clinic through the Ottawa Hospital. I did the screening. I scored exactly as a healthy 67-year-old with no cognitive concerns should score. Dr. Okafor wrote a short letter to that effect and put it in my file. Would you like a copy? She asked. Please, I said. I put it in a folder at home with the documents from Priya's office. Christmas came. I was at the cabin. Vera drove out on the 23rd and stayed through the 27th. We cooked a proper goose, just for the 2 of us, which was the right amount of goose, and we sat by the fire and watched old movies and walked along the lake in the mornings. The ice was just starting to form at the edges. It was the best Christmas I'd had in years. That is not hyperbole. It is simply true. My daughter had organized her Christmas elsewhere. I don't know all the details. I know they rented a hall through the Stittsville Legion because my son mentioned it when he called on Boxing Day. He was in Victoria with his wife's family, and he called to say Merry Christmas and to tell me a long story about something his youngest did at the dinner table, and we laughed, and it was good. January passed quietly. In February, my daughter started calling again with something new. She told me, been thinking about the future, about how I was getting older. She said this with great care, as if I might not know, and about how it would make sense at some point to start thinking about the logistics, the house, the cabin, how things would be divided eventually. That's all taken care of, I said. I know you and Dad had a will, but wills can be complicated. It's all taken care of, I said again. Priya Finch has everything. A brief pause. Who? My lawyer! Oh! Another pause. I didn't know you had your own lawyer. I've had family legal counsel for 30 years, I said. Priya took over the practice from her father-in-law. My daughter said she supposed that was a good thing, and then the conversation moved on to the children, and I told her about the book I was reading, and we said goodbye more or less warmly. In March, Neil called. This call was different from the first one. He did not sound smooth. He sounded uncomfortable, which meant he was saying something he had been asked to say, rather than something he wanted to say. He wondered, he said, whether I had thought at all about the cabin, specifically about what my long-term plans were for it. They had. He paused here in a way that told me he was reading from something, or had rehearsed this. They had spoken to a real estate agent who said waterfront properties in the valley were really moving right now, and that if I was ever thinking of selling, this would be an excellent time. He could put me in touch with the agent. Just to have a conversation. No pressure. I let a moment of quiet sit between us. "Neil," I said, "why are you calling me about real estate?" He fumbled. "We just thought if you're not using it." "I used it at Christmas," I said. "I plan to use it in the summer. I have no plans to sell it." "Right. No, of course. Is there something else going on?" I asked, more fumbling. He said no. I said okay. We said goodbye. I called Vera immediately after. "Real estate agent," she said flatly. "Waterfront properties are really moving right now," I said. A pause. "Eileen, you understand what's happening?" "I think I'm starting to. What does Priya say?" "I haven't told her about this yet." "Tell her." I emailed Priya that afternoon. She called me back within the day. We had a conversation that I found both clarifying and slightly surreal. Surreal because she was matter-of-fact about all of it in a way that made me understand how frequently she deals with situations like this, and clarifying for exactly the same reason. She asked whether I had made any decisions about the restructuring we discussed in January. I told her I had. I told her what I wanted to do. She said she would have the documents ready within 2 weeks. The documents arrived. I reviewed them. I signed them. Priya filed everything. The cabin, as of April 15th, was placed in a trust. The beneficiaries were my grandchildren, both of them, equally, with conditions and a trustee structure that Priya designed and I approved. The trust was irrevocable. I did not tell my daughter, or Neil, or Bev, or anyone. The thing about a trust, the thing most people don't understand until they encounter one, is that once it's done, it's done. The asset no longer belongs to me in the conventional sense. No one can pressure me to sell it or sign it over or put it on the market because I no longer have the power to do any of those things. The trustee is Priya's firm. The beneficiaries are my grandchildren, who will benefit from it when they come of age, or earlier if circumstances warrant. May came. My daughter asked in passing if I'd given any more thought to the cabin situation. "What cabin situation?" I asked. She hesitated. "Just, the future. The cabin is in trust," I said. "For the grandchildren. It's been taken care of." The silence that followed was the longest silence I think she has ever given me. "What?" she finally said. "I put it in a trust for the grandchildren. Priya helped me set it up in April." I paused. I thought it was the right thing to do. Gerald loved that place. I wanted to stay in the family. For the grandchildren. She seemed to be repeating the words to herself. "So it can't be sold, not without the trustee's approval, which would only be granted under specific conditions that I've set out." I kept my voice completely pleasant. "I think the kids will love having a place on the lake when they're older. Don't you?" Another long pause. Does Neil know?" "Why would Neil know about my estate planning before my own family?" She didn't have an answer for that. We talked for a few more minutes about nothing in particular. The weather. The kids' spring activities. She mentioned her son had gotten into the advanced math program. I said I was very proud of him. We said goodbye. That evening I drove out to Calabogie. Not for any practical reason. I just wanted to see the place. The ice had been off the lake for weeks by then, and the water was that particular shade of dark gray-green that it gets in early May, before the summer light comes and turns it blue. I walked down to the dock and I stood there for a while. Gerald's tackle box was still in the shed, exactly where he'd left it. I couldn't bring myself to move it. Some things you just leave. I had one more phone call. It came in June, from Bev. She'd heard, she said, about the trust. "Your daughter told me," she said. "She's upset." "Eileen, I understand," I said. "She feels like you went behind her back. I made private decisions about my private estate," I said. "That's not going behind anyone's back. That's simply my right." Gerald always talked about keeping things simple. Keeping the family together. Gerald also planned very carefully, I said. He believed in doing things properly. I'm doing things properly. Bev was quiet for a moment. She thought. I think she thought she'd be involved in those decisions. Why? I asked, not sharply, genuinely. Why would she be involved in decisions and news about my estate while I'm alive and healthy and fully capable of making them myself? Bev didn't have an answer to that either. We talked for a few more minutes, and then we said goodbye. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't cruel. I thought about Gerald, about how much he'd loved his little sister, and I made a note to myself to call her again in a few weeks, just to talk, just to keep the thread. That summer, my grandchildren came to the cabin for a week in August. My daughter brought them and stayed for a few days herself. We didn't talk about any of it. We swam in the lake, and I taught my granddaughter how to play cribbage, and my grandson caught his first fish, and I watched him hold it up with that particular expression of 7-year-old triumph. Absolutely certain he had done the most important thing in the world, and I thought about Gerald so hard it almost knocked me over. She helped me with dinner one evening, my daughter. We stood at the cabin counter chopping vegetables, and she didn't say anything for a long time, and then she said quietly, "I'm sorry about Christmas. I didn't say anything immediately. I think I was trying to make things happen," she said, instead of asking. "Yes," I said. "I should have asked." "You should have," I said. "It would have been so easy. Just a question." She nodded. She kept chopping. "Are you happy here?" she asked. I thought about it. The lake outside the window, the tackle box in the shed, the grandchildren running somewhere beyond the trees, shouting about something. "I'm getting there," I said. Which was true. I am 67 years old. I am a retired nurse with a pension and a house I own outright, and a lawyer who knows exactly what I want, and a lake that my grandchildren will swim in for the rest of their lives. I have a friend named Vera who will drive 3 hours on December 23rd to eat goose with me by a fire. I have 2 shifts a week at a walk-in clinic that keep me useful and tired in the right measure. I did not spend last Christmas in a kitchen, making turkey for 40 people who did not ask me. I spent it watching ice form on the edges of a lake that Gerald loved. That is enough. More than enough. Some things, it turns out, you don't have to give away, just because someone expects you to.